Hey, folks, welcome to the show. Hello, Sharad. How's it going, man?
It's going very well. After a bunch of fintechs and some security data plays, we're covering a sector that we haven't. We're speaking to someone in the sector which we haven't for a while, actually, haven't we?
Yeah, EdTech is something we have looked at EdTech from a financing standpoint, but not really from the standpoint of the core business model. So today we have with us Anish Srikrishna, CEO of TimesPro. Anish, welcome to the show. You have a fairly extensive and diversified background. You obviously have kind of built your roots within branding and marketing. You were at SpiceJet, Oberoi, Samsung, Coca-Cola for a bunch of years. You were also at Pearson's. You were heading their corporate strategy and business development side for close to five years. Now you've been at Times Pro for close to 9 years.
So we pride ourselves as being a end-to-end higher ed tech platform, and we eventually had to. I eventually had to coin the phrase ed tech to differentiate ourselves from the large number of players trying to solve for a K-12 problem.
Mm-hmm.
I think the larger problem in our country is of access and affordability to higher education skills, which can take people from a very theoretical academic framework to something which is practical, which can make them productive citizens of the country. And I think that's the space where you have very few serious players operating in, and TimesPro is one of them. We have seen the transition from face-to-face, brick-and-mortar, physical center-based learning to now almost 100% fully online, live as well as recorded formats of learning.
Mm-hmm.
We've operated in the early career segment, which, like you said, Nikhil, is the space where we take young people from colleges and we prep them for their first jobs. We also operate in the executive education segment, where we partner with institutes of excellence like IIMs and IITs, and we bring curated courses to the executive segment. So, as much as there is a crisis of skills in the early career segment, there is perhaps an even bigger crisis of skills in the working professional segment.
Mm-hmm.
There's a crisis of general managerial skills, of soft skills, of communication skills on the one hand, and there is a crisis of the whole management technology interface, which has become a huge area of learning for management professionals. On the other hand, and of course, there is technology upgradation virtually at every skill conversation that you have, whether you are already a techie working on basic coding, and you need to upgrade yourself to deal with AI and ML and generative AI and whatever else is around the corner. Or you're a management professional dealing with technology disruption of your business. So there's tremendous upskilling need that also exists. So TimesPro has now fashioned itself as a platform which looks at skilling needs from age, say, 21 to age, say, 60, throughout the career of a working professional.
Right.
So very, very interesting space. And that's where we are. And that age demographic has become the go-to or the shining light in the wider tech sector, with the K-12 segment sort of being softened in recent times. There's one question to understand the model correctly. There's a big gap between people who sort of come out of schools versus the number of seats which are actually available for universities and colleges. Yeah. Is this sort of plugging that gap partially as well, or do you see this as complementary to what you're doing in a college or a university? So look, what you're talking about is the gap, which is called gross enrollment ratio, GER, right? So we have, as a country, we have about 27% gross enrollment ratio, which essentially is the number of people of higher education age who have access to higher education. who have enrolled for a degree program. But that, in the current context, is measured only for physical enrollment in a face-to-face brick and mortar college.
Mm-hmm.
I think the government, in its wisdom, has opened that space up with the NEP and the national education policy. And very interestingly, it has opened it up to quality university players and allowed them to offer the same degree that they were offering in the physical space, uh, make it available in the online space. The opportunities that that creates are exponential. So if you look at why people drop out of high school and drop out from high school and do not pursue graduation, it's a mix of financial reasons. It's a mix of time. Are you able to take out the time to go and commit yourself to 3 years of living in a hostel? Committing yourself to a program.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to move away from the family business or agriculture or whatever it is that your family is involved? Uh, the online degree piece actually frees students up completely to be able to both be productive for their families economically, as well as pursue an education which can finally empower them into something better than just being part of a family vocation. So it's a huge up, and like you rightly pointed out, Sharad, the cross enrollment ratio in a country like ours can actually only be solved if you can start looking beyond brick and mortar solutions. And that's where companies like TimesPro are also playing in. We offer degree programs from multiple universities, IIMs, IITs, as well as regular NARF ranked universities in India for regular undergraduate and postgraduate courses to aspects.
Right. So I mean, the answer probably is that you're doing a mix of both, right? You're doing like standalone certifications for specific skills. You're also doing end-to-end degree programs online. But like, to kind of understand things more from a business model standpoint, are you in the business of conceptualizing and selling courses slash certification slash degree programs, or you're also looking at sourcing jobs and kind of act as a recruiter, or you're doing both? If you could talk a bit about that in terms of what's the value unlock.
We see ourselves as a two-sided platform.
Mm-hmm.
On the one side, you have employers, both potential employers as well as current employers, who are seeking skilled employees. On the other side, we are interacting with educators, both individual educators as well as institutional educators. And we bring them together on a platform where we go out and actively source students. These students could be once again sourced from a B2C kind of model, where we go out, market these courses and get students onto the platform. Or we work with corporations and we look at training needs that the corporations have, and we bring these individual learners into our work stream. So we see ourselves as a platform where all of these models can coexist. The way we go to market is we look at each of these segments. We look at the B2C segment of the market very distinctly from the B2B and also the B2G. Government as a capacity builder is a huge segment in the country. So when we organized our teams, we said, hey, while there is the back end of the platform, which would be the foundation of everything we do, we will have separate sales and marketing efforts, which would go out and talk to each distinct segment separately. So we have an early career-based B2C segment. We have an executive education B2C segment. We have a B2B sales and marketing team, which goes out and talks to corporates. And we have a B2G team, which talks to central and state governments. Besides this, we have, of course, the whole content creation, delivery, instructional design, and technology platform capabilities which operate at the backend.
Right.
So there is a sort of a synergistic way in which all of this come together, and that's what keeps people like me occupied.
Right. Anish, I want to ask you things a bit from a broader macro lens. Now, if you look at TimesPro and if you look at the courses and certifications which are available there, you look at segments like BFSI, technology, ops, healthcare, but they are all predominantly white collar frameworks. And I think other platforms in the market are also, it's looking at the same segment, and it's obviously a function of the kind of economy and the structure that we have. Is blue collar something which strikes you as a potential area to get into going forward? Yes. And if no, what are the challenges that you see and what needs to be done to figure them out?
It's an interesting question. And, when we started out, we were very clear that we are trying to solve problems, of the education system. But we want to be a for-profit, commercially viable enterprise while we do so. So we looked at the segments where there was a learner wallet, which was making sense to the learner, right? So if I charge a lakh of rupees for a 6-month diploma in banking and financial services, then that student needs to be able to recoup that money within a year of being employed, right? That's the economics of the Saraswati to Lakshmi transition, right? So we have looked at this wallet, whether it's coming from a learner wallet, whether it's coming from a employer wallet, or it's coming from a government wallet, and we've looked at the viability of it, and then gone about trying to solve for these problems. So the blue collar segment is something that we address through government funded vocational programs.
Right.
So we run perhaps one of the largest skilling programs in collaboration with the National Skill Development Corporation, where we do interventions in really backward districts. The last intervention was in Jhabua and Madhya Pradesh. I think we'll find something on our social media page. Neil can share it with you post-right. There is a lot of work that gets done at the grassroots. But these are not learners who will be able to pay for their skilling.
Right.
So we look at government programs. We look at ways in which we can take it to the last mile. We look at the delivery of that. And we also look at delivering outcome for these learners. So there's one word which kind of resonates with each one of my business segments. That would be outcome.
Right.
So every one of my business managers has to show both financial and learner outcome as part of his or her KPIs.
Right.
So when you sorry to cut you, when you say learner outcome, is sort of compensation or salary package the go-to metric to gauge that? And part two of that is, so is your content curation or the course curation of what is that sort of bundled into that proposition of what are the jobs that are probably going to come in the next 4, 5, 7 years, or which are going to have that higher, higher ARPU, if you will, higher revenue per user in terms of compensation? But is that the framework that you will decide to curate that content library? Well, I mean, I wish it could be that linear. It's obviously not. There is a lot of hit and trial that happens with content. Content isn't that laser sharp to say, hey, this is what's going to happen. But what we do very well, Sharon, is that we work very closely with the employers in each sector. So if you're talking to bankers and bankers are telling us, hey, you know what, we don't want so many human beings managing our branches anymore. That's all being automated. But what we want is more sales skills. What we want is higher order skills of people who can manage technology. So then we sit with them and start mapping those skills. And then we put that back into our vocational skilling frameworks and start creating content. We bounce that content back with the employers. We invite their executives to come in and spend time with our faculty and our content creators, and indeed to offer their guest lectures as well as part of the offering. So it's an iterative process, and the experience of the team is in being able to accurately spot those opportunities, which can lead to a large, scaled up, and viable business stream. We're not We're not someone who starts with a P&L goal seek in mind. But we do want every one of our businesses to have viability. Yeah. Because we believe in this sector and of course in this country, if you're able to establish baseline viability at a unit economics level, scaling that then becomes very, very possible. But the moment you drink the Kool-Aid saying, "Hey, I'll make a loss for a few years, and then with scale, I shall somehow magically discover profitability." That's not something that we will go after. So our intent for the last decade of existence has been, hey, prove uh, viability at a unit economics level. We're not saying, hey, give me X% EBITDA at the outset. But my direction is, hey, can you prove outcome and viability? If you can prove both, then it's scalable. Right? And since you interface with employees, like you said, do employees ever come to you and say, you know what, why don't you curate like top 50 students from a program or give me the best students? Is there a platform for that level of dialogue to take place on your platform? Yes. So there is a very comprehensive assessment system that we use. We invite employers to be part of it. The way we look at sourcing our students, as it were, is twofold. One is, of course, B2C, social media, Google, and all of that. But the other is that we have teams which are constantly in touch with over 1,000 campuses across the country. We pretty much know the graduating batch. We have a fairly clear idea of what they're going to. So we have ways of getting an assessment, a base level assessment done of people who are seeking employment at the end of their graduation or indeed at the end of their MBA. And we put them through a comprehensive assessment test called the TAP test, the TimesPro aptitude test, followed by an interview process. All of this is done by an in-house team. We keep recordings of these interviews. With the permission of the candidates, these interviews are then played back to employers. So employers at one shot have access to a very large number of graduating students, and their pain of going through an interview is alleviated by what my teams do. And now with AI, we are able to do a lot of this faster, quicker, without as much of human deployment into the process. We're able to give students a link saying, hey, click here. You will be able to, in 15 minutes, get a quick assessment of what your skill set is, what sector would suit you best. And if you want to, you can avail of a free counseling session, which would last 15 minutes. Post that, there would be a paid counseling session, which would probably cost you $99, but it will last an hour. At the end of which you would go through a more comprehensive assessment of which sector you could fit into, and then courses would be made available to you. So it's it's not push a button and get a product at the end of the supply chain. It's far more human. It's far more complex. Each individual has strengths and weaknesses which are assessed fairly comprehensively. Feedback is given. Training inputs are tailor made. If the largest skill gap is of communication skills, right? English skills. And we're not talking, Shakespeare in English. We're talking basic interviewing skills. Can you get past the interview? Can you understand and respond to a written paragraph? Right? Very, very bright students in an interview format where English is used can fail. And so there is a bunch of very tailored inputs that we give to these kids based on their incoming skill sets.
It's very fascinating. The way you said what's the right to win or how to scale in India, right? So from that standpoint, wanna get your point of view on like success generally in edtech and job tech in India, right? I mean, most of the case studies which have worked or which have done well, and probably it's also a function of just the sheer numbers and the level of competitiveness that we have in our economy, is a very are backloaded models, in the sense they are into competitive testing, examinations, they might be into like placements, jobs, training, skilling, etc. Those have been the models which have worked and which have monetized successfully. But the jury is still out when it comes to primary learning outcomes, things like digitization of schools. And there's always a narrative, and it's a very venture capital driven narrative, that if you have to scale up primary and secondary education in our country, it has to be digitized, because that's what's going to allow distribution at the grassroots level. But I don't think there are a lot of success stories there, right? And learning is very interesting, because learning outcomes, whether during COVID, there was a narrative that pretty much everything can happen online, and physically teachers don't need to be around, and pedagogy is something which can be digitized end to end. But clearly now there is sufficient research which is debunking that as well. So is digitization of schools, or is digitization of primary and secondary learning outcomes, is that like a pipe dream? Is that something, is that a more of an investor narrative which is being sold, or is it more a question of just the way these things have been executed to date, that they have left us wanting, and there is definitely a secret sauce which still probably hasn't come out?
No, see, it's a very interesting thing. At the start of this conversation, I think it was you, Nikhil, who said that the sector is so deeply undercapitalized. And I think that is the root, for all of the narratives that have dominated EdTech in the last 10 years. Globally, if you see, the sector is one of the least, capitalized in terms of opportunity areas. Fintech, medtech, everything else attracts faster capital.
Yeah.
And somehow the entrepreneurial response to that low capitalization has been to somewhat beat the drum a little louder, a little faster than perhaps it should have. One of my biggest learnings, having come in from a fast moving consumer goods or a consumer durables industry into this industry, is that human beings, in order to be skilled, need more time than a product that can be rolled off in a single day.
Mm-hmm.
But venture capitalists don't have that time. So edupreneurs are under insane pressure to somehow show a dream and to be able to execute that dream in 3 years' time or whatever the exit class is with the VC, right? So I think companies like TimesPro have, because of course they're working with deeper, older investors, more patient investors. We've been able to demonstrate that hey, there is an opposite truth to digital education. We've been able to demonstrate that hey, not all debunked truths need to be buried. Right? Everyone benefited in COVID, so everyone, went euphoric. And 2 years later, when kids started going back to school, it's not like we didn't expect it. When kids started going back to school, oh my God, it's Armageddon. The truth lies somewhere, starkly in between. You cannot solve for the educational problems in this country through brick and mortar alone. And that is a truth that I hold to be self-evident. It's not a venture capitalist truth. It's just an existential truth.
Right.
You do not have the funds to build the kind of infrastructure that is required. More importantly, you do not have the faculty to be able to deliver any kind of excellence at scale. You could create a few islands of excellence.
Yeah.
But the moment you create, the 10th avatar of that brand, let's take premium institutes. You open a premium institute with with the parent tag, but you open it in, some, back of beyond geography, you don't get the same quality.
Yeah.
You don't get the same kind of faculty.
Yeah.
See, you are doing yourself a disservice by worrying the logic of what technology can do, right? There is access challenges, there is affordability challenges, and those twin challenges to excellence in education is going to remain for a long time. Yeah. And digital technology is not something that is a fad that will come and go with the investor mode of the day. It is something that is required to solve for this problem. The first guy to do it way before the venture capitalists discovered EdTech, was Christiansen, where he wrote the book Disrupting Class, and that is 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. It's still disrupting class. It's just that the sector does it a lot more slowly. Mm.
The one point here is like it's probably it should probably be viewed from two different lenses, right? One is the K-12 segment where the outcome is not so tangible. The growth drivers or educational drivers are much more holistic or much more wide. You're looking at multiple things. But in the segment that you're catering to, all of a sudden the outcomes are very tangible. It's measurable, it's quantifiable, and it's much more targeted as well. So when you look at digital distribution of intellect or education, it probably becomes easier relatively in this segment which you're operating. And that's perhaps what we've seen as well, right? The K-12 segment has been largely a show me story. And EdTech funding in the last since 2021 has come down gradually year over year. 4 billion in 2021, now I think 1 billion in 2023. So you're right that it's undercapitalized, but are you seeing that undercapitalization affect only one segment? Or do you think, because these traits are very different in the skilling and job focused kind of a sector, so behavioral patterns are probably quicker as well? I know you said that it's a slow process and I fully agree, but maybe it's slightly less quick for this segment. Would you agree with that?
I would, and I'll tell you why I would agree with it. And I'll also come back with a couple of caveats there.
Sure.
See, what we are dealing with in the EdTech, in the higher EdTech segment, is the product of 16 years of education in traditional, brick and mortar environment. Right? You got schooling plus 3 to 4 years of college. Right? So we are dealing with the products of 16 years of indifferent education, which has not allowed that learner to be able to clear an interview and get into something productive, something that can pay for his bills, pay for his family, etc. Right? So we are inheriting somebody who is already at a cusp of his or her life, and they are saying, "Hey, you know what? It's now or never." So there is seriousness. There is a final push in terms of, hey, I'm going to get this skill and I'm going to go ahead and try my best, to go and succeed in that. So to an extent, that finishing school part of my business is sharper. There is more focus, both from the learner as well as from the employer, because there is a very sharp need that is getting.
Alignment is there, yeah.
In the executive segment, again, right, if people like you and me believe that, hey, we are short of a skill, what do? Right? We go around, we look at, hey, who's the best person to help solve my skill? Is it an IIM? Is it an IIT? Is it an international university? Or is it an individual tutor who's great? And we go out and find the best way to enroll, and we demand the best out of that program. Right? There's a certain sharpness here.
Yep.
The caveat, of course, is that, hey, many of these outcomes are very black and white outcomes. Right now, I will get you past the post of the interview. What happens in week 1 on the job? What happens in week 2? Is your 16 years of prior education kicking in, or is the 6 months or less that you spent with me kicking in? Right? I got you about the post, or do you have the skills to survive? So that's the caveat. The difference between what we do here and K-12 is, I think, marked in several other aspects, right? Here, we keep going back to the student. The lifetime value of the student to us is far more realizable than it is at a K-12 level. If you speak to, I'm sure you have spoken to, because you mentioned test prep as a category. I'm sure you've spoken to some of the quota majors and test prep. What's their business model? The promises of IIT or NEET, right? 90+% of the students don't make it, will not make it. What happens in month 3? Expectations are reset, right? Student is told, भाई ठीक है आईटी नहीं होगा तेरा बिट्स हो जाएगा, right? Based on his or her capability. So what's being done in these so-called IIT or NEET oriented institutes is number one, a resetting of expectations, and number two, a simple reproduction of what the normal K-12 system should have done in the first place.
Yep.
Right. So therein lies the challenge, right? Because you're promising something, or where you're lending 90% of those kids is something completely different.
Yeah.
Right. And the challenge of scaling such models is that beyond a point, people are going to start questioning. And the lowering of interest in engineering education, lowering of interest in many of these professional fields of education is coming from the extra hype that is being sold ad nauseum. So converting that to an EdTech domain and trying to say, hey, now I'm going to be, giving you this high stakes test training in a completely online format. And, even more complex to a 14, 15-year-old child to say, hey, I'm going to now give it not only online, but in a non-live format. There's no teacher, there's no data, there's no consequence, right? You're going into a class, your attendance doesn't matter. You're expected to now behave like this adult, was self-learning. But on the other, that doesn't really stack up. And the parent is listening to it, right? There are great content that has been created. It's fantastic content. I've seen some of the K-12 content that many of the famous brands have put out. Content is great. But engagement and outcome are a very different piece. And so, to your point, patience from operators in this business is often at odds with what investor outcomes desired are. And then lies the business from.
I mean, that's very fascinating because, like, it's just at the end of the day, it's a service-led offering, right? So, is that the right to win in your way? That number one, it has to be hybrid from day one. You need to have feet on the street, and you need to look at the service deliverables and not just the product. Do you think that's how that's the secret sauce?
So I stopped looking for the secret sauce. Okay, I am primarily looking at what keeps my learner, productive, what keeps my learner engaged, and if there is a requirement for a certain number of hours of face-to-face learning, we will provide that.
Right.
If there is a requirement for a physical assessment center to be provided, we will provide that. And all of this, of course, within the framework of saying, hey, my business has to survive to see.
And you target those categories accordingly. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think the elusive hunt for a secret sauce is not really the hunt that I am after. And perhaps not the education hunt at all. You have, I mean, and it's not so difficult. right? If you have a nice digital platform to provide a physical experience to some of the students some of the time, it's not such a big leap of strategy, right? It's a cost consideration. If you can make the cost work, and if you can make the outcome happen, one should look at it. It's not an either or. I mean, I only smile wryly every time a digital platform goes out and says, now we're going to be starting physical sectors. And most of my team would look at them struggling and say, so, oh, what's the difference in your approach? Have you changed anything fundamentally? Answer is no.
Yeah.
And right.
You used you briefly said higher LTVs is sort of we expect from this segment. Just want to break down a little bit. Is that how do you view lifetime value of a customer? Do you expect a customer, let's say he or she sort of does well, gets a job, do they expect you to take additional courses going down the line, and as their income goes up, they sort of continue engaging with, enriching, or sort of equipping themselves with newer skills? Is that how you sort of typically look at? And the second, or do you see price growth? Like, do you expect once brand builds more in success stories that can price up? Like, how do you sort of view LTV on a high level?
So let's look at those two questions separately. I think LTV is real. We're a 10-year-old business. We have put almost a couple of lakh students into entry-level jobs in BFSI and in various other streams. These students are now 7-8 years experienced, right? They're already looking to upskill. They're already looking to see, hey, what else can we do? And we've had instances where people have come back to us and said, listen, we took this BFSI diploma from you 8 years ago, and now we want to look at an IIM course. But given my background, etc., I will not fit into a regular IIM course, but can I fit into an executive course?
Got it.
And then we get a lot of that from our past learners, and therefore we also one important thing about our business is that we get about 14% referrals. Right. So even for our high-priced executive courses. So if you look at our degree program, the EPGP degree program from IIM Kozhikode, that is priced at something like 15 lakhs. Right. It's a 2-year online degree program. And we get about 14% referrals from past students who want to take that program through the TimesPro platform. Across the business, the range is between 10 to 20%. Right. So there is that positive word of mouth. There is that referral database that comes up. Generally speaking, to your price question, Sharad, India will tend to always go down the pyramid on pricing. So we started with very high-priced programs in both the early career as well as in the executive education domain. And we established our model, our viability there. Now we've started looking at the next 10% and the next 10% of the pyramid. And as we go down, we are conscious that, hey, affordability is a serious issue. So if you look at our current banking programs, we have actually repriced our program to what the learner and the employer are actually looking for. Right. So our current programs are largely certificate programs, which can be earned in between 45 days to 3 months. They give you specific inputs, day one skills, and hey, this is what you will expect day one in the job. Right. Employers are happier because there's quicker turnaround. Students come in at least knowing the language. They come in knowing, hey, what is CASA? What's your first ask from your manager? So there is that kind of demand supply reassessment that keeps happening. We believe that with digital technology, especially with AI driven teaching, we can bring adult education into the kind of scale that we have never seen before in this country. I fundamentally believe that we can bridge the GER goal. Government has set a goal of 50%,
50%,
in 5 years' time. I believe we can bridge it faster.
Right.
And more importantly, while bridging it, we're not just handing out degrees. We are actually solving for outcomes after those degrees. So degree which was at a fee point of maybe 5 or 6 lakhs is now available online for a fraction of that. Would the learner be willing to pay something extra for a finishing course at the end of that program, which would get him or her into a job interview? What is that extra that the learner would be able to pay? Those are the kind of opportunities that we are looking at. So as we go down the platform, the opportunities become a lot more interesting. And the other day, I was talking to a senior HR person from the hotel industry, and I asked him, "So, what are you doing for your entry level recruitment?" And his response was, "Listen, it's a nightmare. I'm not able to find people or graduates willing to work for hotels anymore." And we got talking. He told me about the whole IHM mess we're in. The fee points are so high, salaries are not so high. People are not enrolling into IHMs anymore. There's a huge export of hospitality executives from India. Trained hospitality executives post-COVID have all been picked up. So, we as a hospitality industry in this country have a serious problem with talent. So I got talking and I asked him, "Hey, why do you really need graduates? You need an IHM graduate to do the job. You guys are great trainers yourself. What is the skill set that you really need?" And it was an interesting conversation because she opened up and said, "Listen, I could train 12 standard pass outs, right? Equally well. And they would be grateful for the kind of salaries that the hotel industry gets." And then he said, "Hey, you know what? If you can help get them a degree while they're working, I'd be happy to pay for the cost of the degree. Provided the kid sticks with me for 3 years." Now, that's a very interesting proposition, right? To take to a kid who's coming out of high school. Right? You have the opportunity to earn while you learn.
Yeah.
Right? And you work in a nice environment. You're not going and working in the sun in the farms. You have the opportunity to work in a nice 5-star environment. Yes, the work is hard, but you get paid reasonably well. And if you stick to that job in 3 years, you get a degree which is paid for by your employer. So there are a lot of these interesting, nuggets of insight that come out. Right? And we try to build models that address.
It's very interesting also because I think there are also parallels to, like this sounded very much like an apprenticeship kind of a framework you have in France and Germany. So there are also precedents, right, globally, maybe not in the same sector or the same segment. That's probably more blue collar, hands-on skill-based work. But no, this has been very fascinating. I just have one, kind of final question, because you have you obviously have a very good vantage point, and you have a fairly deep grip on the pulse of what recruiters or what employers are looking for from a skill set standpoint. Are there any categories or segments, if you have to kind of look through the crystal ball in the next 4 or 5 years, which you think are really picking up in terms of demand? There is a lot of noise around generative AI. There's a lot of noise around, the shortage of talent in that particular segment. Are you also seeing that, at the ground level, or any other?
Well, I think, to be honest, I think the hype around generative AI, will go through its hype cycle. And while there is going to be a lot of demand for very talented coders, who can code in ML, that's an area that we're definitely looking at. I'm not sure, a 3-week course in generative AI is going to land 1 million jobs. That's unlikely to happen. I think for a country like India, we will probably have some kind of a legislative approach to ensure that jobs continue to drive the economy. I don't think we're ready for a situation where we can get into a completely jobless AI driven economy. I don't think we are there yet.
Right.
I think these sectors that will continue to drive employability will be the financial sector. Banking and financial services is one of our largest sectors. I think the services industry, hospitality, restaurants are going to drive massive employment. Tourism is a very under explored sector from a mass employability perspective. That's massive employability. That's possible. I think services across the board are going to be very, very interesting. Not yet seeing that happening from a manufacturing perspective. And you can see that even in engineering colleges, traditional mechanical, electrical, and civil engineering departments are largely empty. Most people are choosing to go for electronics or for computer science or for AI with computer science. So, that virtuous cycle of manufacturing is probably going to take time. And in what form it will come here, we don't know. But certainly, I think from an employability standpoint, we have a massive challenge. We have a massive human challenge as a country. And I see these sectors continuing to drive employability at a mass level. And of course, in the blue collar segment, there is a lot that is happening. Retail is a huge driver. You're seeing tremendous opportunities opening up in modern retail, in distribution, in logistics and supply chain. One of the big pushes from the government is infrastructure and logistics. If India can become a great logistics hub, that should open up a lot of reasonably high-paying jobs in supply chain management. So I think there's still a lot of grassroots employability in the services segment that will pick up. And I'm very, very bullish about those sectors.
Right. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Anish, for your time, and wish you and TimesPro all the best for larger and more significant milestones in the future. And it was great fun chatting with you today. And with that, it's Nikhil Arora and with me, Sharad Tupran, signing off.